Summary of Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Hercule Poirot, a famous French investigator, boards a train in Aleppo, Syria, with the intention of traveling to Istanbul. Colonel Arbuthnot, a British officer stationed in India, and Mary Debenham, a young English teacher, are also in the train car. The two seem to know each other because they were on the same train, and Poirot hears them talking in a polite way about a time in the future called when it's all over. At the hotel in Istanbul, Poirot gets a letter asking him to go to London, so he makes plans to take the Orient Express and gets dinner at the hotel restaurant in the meantime. There, he runs into an old friend, embark, who is the head of the company that runs the Orient Express, wagons lit. A young man and an older man from the United States are also eating. Poirot talks about how the older of the two men looks. At first glance, he seems safe, but a closer look shows that he has a bad side. When embark and Poirot get on the Orient Express, they find that every section is full, which is odd for this time of year. Poirot has to share a second-class cabin with the young American from the hotel kitchen. Later, in the eating car, Poirot takes some time to watch the 13 other people in the car, who come from all classes and nationalities. These people include Ms. Debenham and Colonel Arbuthnot from the last part of the trip, as well as Hector McQueen and Mr. Ratchet, two Americans from the hotel kitchen. Poirot also sees Princess Dragomirov, an old Russian woman, and Mrs. Hubbard, a rude American woman. Countess and Count Andrenii of Hungary, a Swedish woman named Greta Olsen, and an Italian guy named Antonio Foscarelli are also there. After dinner, Mr. Ratchet figures out that Poirot is a detective and asks him to find out who sent him some threats, but Poirot says no. After trading rooms with embark, Poirot goes back to his cabin and goes to sleep. A while later, Mr. Ratchet's loud groan from the next cabin wakes him up. The conductor asks at the door, and the person says everything is fine in French. When Poirot can't fall asleep, he talks to Pierre Michel, the director, who tells him that Mrs. Hubbard, the American woman, says she saw a dark figure in her room. He also says that heavy snow has stopped the train in Yugoslavia. Before Poirot goes to sleep, he hears a thud and looks into the hallway to see a person in a red robe running by. Embark calls Poirot in the morning to tell him that Mr. Ratchet was killed during the night. Dr. Constantine, a Greek doctor, looks at the body and sees that Ratchet was cut many times. Since they are stuck in the snow and can't get help from the cops, embark asks Poirot to take over the case, and Poirot agrees. Mr. McQueen, Ratchet's servant, tells Poirot that Ratchet had received several frightening letters, but he doesn't know much else about Ratchet's life. Poirot sends him away and looks at the body and the scene of the crime. Ratchet has been stabbed 12 times, but it looks like two guys with different amounts of power did it. Even worse, Ratchet got some stab wounds after he was already dead. In Ratchet's room, Poirot finds many clues that seem too convenient, as if this were a detective's novel: a woman's handkerchief with a H on it, a stopped pocket watch that supposedly shows the time of the murder, a pipe cleaner, and a burned letter fragment with the name Daisy Armstrong. Poirot connects the name Daisy Armstrong to a crime that happened in the United States. Daisy Armstrong was the daughter of Colonel Armstrong and Sonia Armstrong, an American couple with a lot of respect and connections. Daisy was taken from her home when she was 3. The Armstrongs paid the thieves a lot of money, but Daisy was already dead when they got back. Sonia Armstrong died, and Colonel Armstrong killed himself because he was so sad. After being wrongly blamed for the kidnapping, Daisy's French nursemaid also killed herself. Cassetti, a thug, was almost found guilty of the crime, but he got away with it by paying off high-ranking officials. Poirot comes to the conclusion that Ratchet is really Cassetti and that he has changed his name after running away to Europe. Poirot then starts talking to the people on the plane. Each of them seems surprised that Mr. Ratchet was really the bad guy Cassetti, and each of them has a good reason for where they were when he was killed. Mrs. Hubbard, an American, says that the killer was in her house last night, even though she says that the door between her room and Ratchet's room was locked the night before. Mrs. Hubbard finds a button from a conductor's outfit near her window. When Poirot takes it as proof, she seems relieved. Before he talks to the next person on the list, Princess Dragomirov, Poirot shows the button Mrs. Hubbard found to the director Pierre Michel. Pierre says he didn't lose a button, and he calls a conductor from another train car to back up his story. In an interview, Princess Dragomirov says that she knew the Armstrongs and was even Sonia Armstrong's aunt. She talks about Sonia's mother, the actress Linda Arden, and Sonia's younger sister, who moved to England, in a hazy way. While talking to the guests, Poirot learns a few important things. Cyrus Hardman tells Mr. Ratchet that he is not a typewriter seller but a private investigator hired by him to keep him safe. Ratchet also told him to look out for a small, dark man with a female voice. A few people on the train say they saw this small, dark guy in a conductor's outfit and a tall woman in a red kimono the night before. Poirot sums up the information, which is often contradictory, after talking to all of the guests. Poirot wants to look through each passenger's bag. Mrs. Hubbard comes in all of a sudden to say that she found a knife in her bag. Poirot says that the murder weapon was a knife, but he doesn't say much else. When they start looking through the luggage, they find a conductor's outfit in Hildegard Schmidt's bag. Poirot had expected this would happen, but it doesn't make him think she's guilty. Poirot also has a long talk with Ms. Debenham, during which he tells her about the conversation he overheard on the train from Syria. She refuses to explain it, though, and he gets angry with her. Poirot finally finds the red kimono in his own suitcase. He thinks this is a defiance from the person or people who killed the woman. Poirot makes a list of the clues and the questions that still need to be answered. Ratchet's pocket watch was set to 1:15, but it's not clear if the murder happened then or if the killer wants them to think it happened then. They have an expensive cloth that is embroidered with a H, but no traveler will claim it. They also have a pipe cleaner, which makes it look like Colonel Arbuthnot is the only one who smokes a pipe, but when asked about it, he just shrugged. Poirot saw a grease spot next to Countess Andreniai's first name on her passport, which points to a change. Poirot starts to tell people what he has learned from his conclusions. Helena, not Elena, is the first name of the Countess. After the handkerchief with a H was found in Ratchet's cell, the Count changed her passport. However, the handkerchief isn't hers, and they say they are innocent. Helena does admit that she is really Helena Goldenberg, who is Sonia Armstrong's sister. This is why she was so desperate to avoid being blamed for Ratchet's death. After that, Princess Dragomirov steps forward to take the cloth. Next, Poirot goes after Ms. Debenham, who he knows to be Daisy Armstrong's teacher. She confirms this, and Colonel Arbuthnot jumps to her defense. Then, a number of passengers admit to lying. Antonio Foscarelli says he was the Armstrongs' chauffeur, Greta Olson says she was Daisy's nurse, and Masterman, Mr. Ratchet's butler, says he was Colonel Armstrong's help in World War I. This is enough for Poirot to ask everyone on the train to meet in the eating car so he can explain how the crime could be solved. Poirot has two ways to solve the case. The first is that the small, dark man Hardman talked about got on the train at a stop in Belgrade or Vinkovci, changed into a conductor costume, cut Ratchet 12 times, and then got off the train. The guests aren't sure about this, but M'Book and Dr. Constantine aren't happy with it, so Poirot gives them another option. He goes over the problems with the case and comes to the conclusion that each of the 12 people, including the driver Pierre Michel, killed Ratchet because they all knew Daisy Armstrong or someone in her family. This is why the cuts look like they were done by different people. They were. Also, the 12 passengers worked together to throw Poirot false or useless clues, like the stopped watch, the handkerchief, and the red kimono itself. Poirot thinks that an artist would be needed to pull off a plan like this, and he is about to figure out that Mrs. Hubbard is the actor Linda Arden when she comes forward and admits it. She talks about how sad everyone was about Ratchet's crime and how the 12 of them planned the murder. They included Pierre Michel, the father of Daisy's French nursemaid, Hardman, the nursemaid's lover, and Colonel Arbuthnot, who fought in the war with Colonel Armstrong. Linda Arden asks Poirot what he plans to do, and M'Book says that Poirot's first idea for how the crime could have been solved was, after all, more likely. Poirot is convinced, and as a result, the 12 conspirators are protected from further investigation and arrest.
About the author. Agatha Miller, who would later become Agatha Christie, was born around the turn of the 19th century into a family that belonged to the upper middle class. Her father died too soon in 1901, but she still had a happy childhood. She went to school at home and in Paris, and as she grew up, she became a dedicated and eager reader. Christie was also good at writing from a young age. She finished her first book in 1911, but she couldn't find a publisher for it. At the start of World War I, she married an army soldier called Archibald Christie. However, Archibald's cheating caused them to split up in 1928. After the war, she wrote her first book, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. It was about the famous detective Hercule Poirot, whom she based in part on Belgian soldiers she cared for as a nurse in Torquay. In 1930, she went to Istanbul, where she met Max Malawan, who would become her second husband. In the middle of her work, her books would be set in the Middle East and be influenced by it. After she moved back to England, Christie spent the rest of her time writing. During World War II, she helped out in the pharmacy at University College Hospital in London. Christie wrote more than 60 mystery stories, and many of them featured Poirot or Miss Marple, another detective who appeared in many of her books. Because of this, she became the best-selling author of all time. Under the name Mary Westmacott, she also wrote a few more personal and traditional books. In 1971, she was given the title of Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in honor of her long and successful writing career. In 1976, she died in the English town of Wallingford.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.